Okay guys, welcome to this special interview in the Fat Loss Summits. Today we're going to be talking with Krista Scott Dixon, and I'm telling you, this is one of the best interviews you are going to watch in this summit. No offense to any of the other amazing interviews, but this one it's a meta interview. There's going to be so many amazing topics that are going to make your lifestyle so much more effective, whether it be eating or exercise or anything else. There's going to be so many great messages, like talking about the power of environments and how to make small change so that you can enjoy lasting success, and so many other great things. Now, Krista is, and she's one of the, as John Berardi, who's the co-founder of Precision Nutrition, calls her the heart of Precision Nutrition. She is an integral component of their team and the organization, developing a lot of their curriculum and helping their coaches better coach their everyday people, help them achieve the change they want. So she really has a very good understanding of how to create change in clients as well as a lot of professionals. She holds a PhD. She's a former professor at York University, and she also has a really cool background in kind of the fighting space, and not like, you know, fighting on the street space. But anyways, we'll get into that in the interview, and you'll learn a lot more about her and how she can help you achieve your goals, whatever they might be. So sit tight, grab a tea or a green juice, and enjoy the interview. All right, guys, welcome to the Fat Loss Summits. Today I'm joined by Krista Scott Dixon. Welcome to the Fat Loss Summits.
Thank you.
Well, I'm really excited because, as we've been talking about off camera here, is this notion that most of us, I think, know relatively what to eat, and that we should be exercising and hopefully in the right manner. But for whatever reason, we're still not doing it. Or a lot of us are having trouble with, you know, starting and stopping, or we kind of commit to a New Year's resolution or a 12-week transformation, and then 2 weeks in, we're like, we kind of veer off to our old habits. So we're going to look at why that happens and how to overcome a lot of that stuff, because you are, you know, one of the top kind of coaches with Precision Nutrition, and you've worked with thousands and thousands of regular people as well as fitness professionals to help them help their clients. So I'm really excited to dig in here. It's gonna be a lot of fun. Before we do, tell us about how you got into this, how you got into helping people kind of figure out how to transform.
Well, you know, as we were talking about earlier, a lot of the times we go into helping professions when we ourselves are broken, right? And so a lot of this was about learning to help myself 20 years ago when I was broken. And so when I was a grad student in the mid-90s, I was definitely broken. I was living on chicken wings and beer and sitting in my chair for 12 hours a day and, you know, 50 or 60 pounds overweight and pretty miserable about it. And so I wanted to start exercising. I have no physical skill whatsoever. I can't catch a ball, I can't run, I'm just not good at anything physical really by, you know, nature. And so I wanted to lift weights, but I didn't know how to start. Mm-hmm. And so I found myself at this real point of frustration thinking, I want to change, but I don't even know where to start or who can help me. Maybe nobody can help me, and maybe I'm doomed. So it was a very interesting way to begin, and luckily as a grad student I had access to a university library. I could go and read textbooks on training and biomechanics and physiology and figure out a pathway towards helping myself. And so that's kind of how I got started. It was very self-taught, very just piecemeal, cobbling things together and figuring things out for myself, going through it myself. All those stages of change that people go through was very, very helpful. And then I thought, you know, it would be really useful if someone else could benefit. So that's kind of how I got started, really.
Nice. Mm-hmm. Awesome. So you brought up the word change, and I think change is one of those words that, you know, maybe subconsciously we're all scared of, because as much as we want to improve ourselves, the notion of change requires getting out of our comfort zone. So what are some of the things that what are some of the things that you've noticed are important for people to have in place to go from A to B and then ultimately to Z in that whole process of change?
It's such a good question, and there's so many things. I think one of them is even understanding the steps. And you might not know what step Z is, right? But I think what happens a lot is that people start at point A and they think, okay, I'm going to get to point B. But what they don't realize is that there are probably a lot more sub-steps in there than they anticipate. So they try to get to B and they can't. And they think, well, what's wrong with me? I must be terrible or stupid or whatever. So what they haven't fully appreciated is there's like an A1, an A2, and an A3. And so one of the big pieces in changing is actually just understanding that it looks different than you'll expect. And that those little steps are going to be much, much smaller. So that would be piece number one. Piece number two, I would say, is just starting to build an environment that is conducive to change, right? And even in small ways, you don't have to overhaul your whole life, right? And you just can't.
Yeah.
But thinking about your daily routines, your schedules, your systems, even stuff like booking 5 minutes for yourself, booking time to go to the grocery store. Really having support systems around you, I think, is absolutely crucial, because it's possible to change if you don't have them. But it's so hard. It's so hard. So really building that support system is critical.
Awesome. So you mentioned kind of the step A1, A2. So if someone wants to lose, let's say, 20 pounds, what would some of those micro steps look like?
Well, one of the first ones we do with our clients is just sitting down and thinking about, why do you want to lose 20 pounds? Like, what is 20 pounds for you? What does that mean to you? What do you anticipate that you will feel when you lose 20 pounds? Who do you anticipate that you will be at the end of those 20 pounds? So we ask our clients right off the bat to think about, why are you doing this? And that's really helpful, because if I'm losing weight for my health, let's say, maybe I had a diabetes scare or something like that, that feels very different than if I'm losing weight to look good in a bikini, right? Or get into a wedding dress. Like the experience of that will be different.
Sure.
And so in the beginning, it's really, really important to know, why am I even doing this? And is it for me? Is it for someone else? Is it for something else? Clarifying your motivations. And of course, motivations change, right? Every week your motivation can change, and that's okay. But understanding, what am I actually trying to do here, is a really important first step before you even start with any daily life actions.
So the reason why.
The why. And you'll never fully know, right? It's not like you're going to have a life-changing revelation or anything like that. But to even dig into that a little bit, I think, is powerful for people.
That's awesome. So once they've established their why, what's next? Do they start setting a goal, micro goals, deadlines, or what happens next?
I'm not a huge fan of goals, to be totally honest.
Sure.
And the reason for that is that a goal is not a plan, right? A goal is like, I would like to go to Florida. Okay, cool. Yeah. How are you going to get there? Are you going to fly? Are you going to drive? Do you have a map? Where are you staying? Right? And so I like people to start with what is already working. So instead of setting a goal that is kind of out there and far away and external, I'm like, okay, what are you already doing in some way that is moving you to where you want to be? Because almost everyone is, right? When we decide we want to change, there's inevitably been some steps towards that, right? So I probably already have skills that I can use. Maybe I'm organized, right? Maybe I'm a good cook. Maybe I'm really good at time management. I might already be doing things or have things that can get me there. So maybe I already have a gym membership that I don't use, but maybe I have it, right? Maybe I have a dog that I can walk. Maybe I have running shoes. So I like to get people to start with taking a survey of, what do you already have? What do you already know? What skills do you already have? Do you have someone who can help you? Basically, what's already going well for you? And how can you do more of that?
So it's almost like the acres of diamonds, where instead of like seeking out amazing ventures elsewhere, it's like looking in your own backyard and seeing what assets you already have.
Exactly.
And working with that.
Exactly, because most people are already pretty functional people, right? They've succeeded in other domains of their life. They're successful teachers and lawyers and doctors, or just whatever they do, or they're successful parents, or there's something in their lives that is already successful. Yeah. So all you have to do is do more of that in a different place.
That's a great segue, because I find I often tell my clients, how you do anything is how you do everything. And there's a lot of transference from, if you're successful in one area of life, you'll probably have the skill set or fundamentals to be successful in another area. Yet there are a lot of people that are very successful in business that are 100 pounds overweight, or whatever it might be. Why do you think that is? Like, why is there that kind of disconnection with some people that have been amazingly successful at raising kids, for instance, but not able to stick to a regular exercise schedule?
Yeah, it's an interesting question. I would say that as human beings, we have a certain kind of almost, I would call it like a domain blindness, right? So that in one domain, we have a view of ourselves as capable, or capable enough anyway. And for some reason, we don't see that what we do here can apply here. We have difficulty applying it. Yeah. And not everyone is like this, but I think there are different degrees of people's understanding of applicability, right? Also, with certain domains of our lives, we have scripts that we've already written for ourselves, right? My script when I was overweight as a grad student was, well, my whole family's Eastern European and we're designed to look like potatoes, and this is my inevitable genetic destiny, and I'm just doomed to be fat. Like, that was the script that was running in my head. And so when it comes to nutritional change or health or fat or whatever, a lot of people have these scripts that almost prevent them from seeing the capabilities that they have elsewhere. So I think part of the change project is about surfacing those scripts, first of all, like understanding that you're even telling yourself a story, and then thinking about, okay, how could I change this script? Because this is a pretty familiar script, but I could rewrite it if I wanted to.
That's very cool. So it's almost like a belief system to some degree in the story that you're telling yourself.
Yeah.
It doesn't matter if it's true or not, it's just that you believe
No,
it.
it's and you'll find confirming evidence.
Yeah.
Right? If I have the story that I'm a loser, I can just go out in the world and find evidence that I'm a loser.
Yeah.
Right?
I have a confession to make here. I watch and enjoy The Bachelor. So there you go. Some of you may already know this. But anyways, one of the things I found really interesting is when a lot of the women who don't get a rose, and then they're talking to the camera, crying afterwards, a lot of those scripts start to surface. And it's in simple things like, oh, it happened again.
Yes.
Or, he didn't like me just like everyone else,
yes.
Or this always happens to me. And it's like, well, okay, whoa, now you're starting to really bring a lot of stuff up to surface. And so it's very interesting to be able to hopefully self-identify a lot of this stuff, because I guess when you're aware of it, you can start to change it, hopefully for the better.
Yeah, and one of the coaching tools that we use, and it's so simple, we just call it notice and name. Just start to notice what you're telling yourself or what you're doing, and give it a name, call it out. Say, oh, I'm telling myself a story right now. Even if I can't dislodge that story, right? Even if I'm still attached to that story that I'm a loser or whatever, at least I now know it's a story that I'm telling myself. Yeah. So just noticing and naming whatever, our feelings, our behaviors, our scripts, all of those things, just starting to become aware.
That's awesome. So with all of the clients you guys have worked with and have coached to amazing success, what are some of the common traits that have led them to be successful, body transformation wise or other, that maybe were not as present in those who didn't see the same levels of success relative to themselves, I guess?
Yeah, it's so interesting, because I think the assumption is that if you succeed at body transformation, you must have some hook, right? You must have some talent or some special gift. And it's really not true. And the people that succeed have the most banal of gifts, which is that they just kept showing up. They kept showing up. They were open to the process of change. They made themselves coachable, right? Which is difficult, because we come in with entrenched defenses. We don't want to be seen as stupid. We don't want to be seen as not knowing things or not being able to do things. And so the people that don't succeed, ironically, are the people who come in saying, I already know how to do this. I already know how to do this. I already eat healthy. I already do this and this and this. And that was me. I was that client, right? But the clients who truly succeed come in and they're a blank slate. And they say, you know what? Whatever I've been doing has not worked up till now. I need to try something different. I need to be open to feedback and coaching, to learning, and I need to show up every day and just put in the work. And I don't have to be awesome every day, but I have to show up consistently. And in our research with so-called high-level clients, we found their biggest stumbling block is consistency. They know all this stuff. They've trained at high levels, but they cannot be consistent. So if I have a client who can put in like a B grade effort every single day, he or she will kick ass. Versus the client that will show up for a week, do A++, super hardcore, beast mode, and then just crash and burn.
Yeah, totally. Yeah, it's very interesting. Consistency is like, you're either consistent or non-existent, as some people in the personal development world have said at some point. But it's so true, because Like I use my own mom as an example. You know, she's a typical I know all this type of person, but you know, it's been years, and it's like, well, when I start doing stuff, then everything's gonna get better. So, well, it's like, well, just start doing it. And I think you just mentioned like coachability is huge, because it's like if you're trying to work with somebody and their proverbial glass is already full, then there's no room for them to grow, I guess, or learn, versus somebody who comes in with an empty glass and it's just like, fill me up, let me just take it in and I'll do what you say.
Yeah. And you know, doing what you say is particularly important, because we tend to think that having insight is enough, or knowing is enough, or having information is enough, but that's not action. And only action creates change, really. I mean, you can have important insights, right? You can have moments of, you know, light bulb clarity, but if you don't act on that consistently in the world, then no change can occur. So we really try to help people understand the importance of just taking action. And to go back to your question about small changes, that's one small change, right? What can you do in the next 5 minutes to get you closer towards where you want to be, right? As long as there's some motion, forward motion in that direction, you're changing.
Yeah, that's huge. That's pretty profound stuff. Action is, I think it's one of those things that is so, it's not given enough importance, I find. Like, you know, because watching this, listening to this, you're going to get a ton of amazing information, but it doesn't mean anything unless you get up off the couch and do something.
Yes.
Whether that's make a healthy meal, go for a walk or a workout. So what is, again, does it come back to stories? Does it come back to limiting beliefs, to why people have all this knowledge but don't take action? Like, what is it a momentum thing? How do we get people from taking their knowingness to the doingness of that?
That's a great question, and I think there's lots of reasons for not taking action. One of them perhaps is just that we've elevated thinking about things and information culturally as something that's valuable, right? It may be like a middle class kind of thing, right? Where learning and education is seen as more valuable than using your hands and doing things.
Yes, quadratic.
Well, I think of like my working relatives who are like, come on, you can't hammer a nail, right? In certain worlds, action is privileged over thinking. So it could be the thinking, the cultural prioritization of thinking. But to kind of go into a more serious area, people who struggle with body stuff, with weight, with health, with self-care, often have some kind of trauma in their lives. And taking action at this stage is paralyzing for them. So paralysis is a response to trauma and to feeling powerless. And so a lot of our clients come in with this pattern of powerlessness in their lives. And so they can't conceptualize taking action anymore in any way, right? Because there's been a pattern of inaction and prevented action, blocked action. So, you know, it ranges from the most banal to the most profound of explanations.
So paralysis, I find with this day and age of having so much information, when we're overwhelmed, I think that leads to paralysis, because when you've had so many options, you have none. It's like going to a restaurant and having more pages than there are tables in the restaurant, and you're just like, well, you just choose for me. I don't know what to do. So is the best thing for people to maybe just do the simplest, like the most, I guess the kind of the lowest hanging fruit? Like if they're paralyzed by the fear of taking action, maybe is it that they're making it too big in their own head?
Yes.
Or is it just a simple matter of like, okay, let's just do the smallest possible thing. Let's just take a fork out of the drawer, or just put our shoes on.
Yes.
Is that the solution, or?
Yeah, that's a huge part of it, actually. You've tapped into something really important, which is the idea of decision fatigue, right? I mean, we're so overwhelmed by choice now. You go into the grocery store, and even if you have even if you want to buy an apple, there's 15 kinds of apple. Which is the best kind of apple? I don't know, right? If I get this apple, will I regret not getting that apple? So I think it's the sheer number of choices, as well as the amount of information coming in, and we just can't process it. So there's a lot of decision fatigue, right? There are so many possible options. I'm exhausted from deciding. So I think you're quite right that reducing the available options paradoxically makes us more free.
I totally get that. I mean, for me, I It's like there's a lot of research, as you probably know, on willpower and how it's kind of like this fleeting thing where we have a lot of it early in the day, and then it just kind of dwindles away like our smartphone by the end of the day when we're making all these decisions and resisting temptations. And that's probably why a lot of people have trouble at dinner time. It's like, oh, I don't want to think about what to have for dinner. Let's just have pizza. So is it as simple as reducing choices? Are there other things? Does preparation and planning come into play here where we can plan stuff ahead of time so we don't have to think about what we're going to have for dinner, or we don't have to think about what we're going to do in the gym?
Yeah, absolutely. Planning and prep is huge.
Yeah.
And as is routine. Scheduling, systems, routine, like wherever you can eliminate the energy leak of having to decide. The less you can decide, the better. Or you do all the deciding in the beginning, right? Yeah. You kind of front end load the deciding and then you just execute. Because one of the problems is we tend to make our decisions at the worst possible time, right? So let's say I've come home from work and I'm starving and it's been a crazy day and I'm eating dinner and I, at some point in dinner, I think, oh, I'm trying to lose weight, so I should just have a small portion and stop there. Yeah. If I get to the end of my small portion, in that moment, I'm so poorly equipped to make the decision to stop. There's no way, right? Unless I'm like iron fisting, like white knuckling it. Most of the time I can't, because I've put myself at the worst possible time to make that decision. That's the worst fork in the road.
It's like going to the grocery store when you're hungry.
Totally, right? It's exactly the same thing. So the idea is change the decision timing. So reduce the amount of decisions if possible, routinize it, streamline it, and then change the decision timing. Make the decision at a different time than your moment of difficulty or weakness.
Yeah, that's a lot of simple but very, very powerful stuff. And this stuff applies to anything. It's not just exercise and nutrition. This is like every aspect of life. This is like meta stuff. This is like the umbrella of life, which is pretty amazing. So on the flip side of having difficulty changing and kind of moving towards our goals, what about the kind of the other end of the spectrum where it's the higher performers who are looking to get from 12% to 10% body fat, or the athlete who wants to shave off a millisecond of his sprint time? Obviously, we're not talking to sprinters here, but what is it the same process for those high-level achievers who want to get to the next level as opposed to just getting started?
It's an interesting question, and I'll tell you, one of the things that distinguishes the elites from sort of the amateurs is that the elites are incredibly dedicated to getting feedback. They examine every aspect of their performance, looking for a little tweak, looking for a little improvement. And you would expect that an elite performer would have it all dialed in, right? That they would be the I know what to do. But in fact, the elites are elite because they are the blank slate. So they go and do a performance or they run a race, whatever. They watch the videotape of that performance. They scrutinize their performance. They're getting feedback constantly. The higher up you go, the more coaching you get, which is the opposite of what you would expect, right? So what really distinguishes the elites is this relentless commitment to feedback and incremental improvement. Like, even if it's like, if I wear a different outfit, does that change something? If I hold my head 2 inches this way, does that change anything, right? It's an attention to the subtle elements. Now, obviously, they're operating at a higher level. They have the foundation nailed, right? That's the other crucial distinction, is that elites can do the fundamentals with a level of mastery that an amateur can't. So if we're talking about, for example, the people we call level 3 eaters, right? So level 1 eaters are like just beginners, nutritional beginners. They just want to feel better. They just want to get a little healthier, right? Most people are level 1 and should be level 1. Then we have our level 2s who are, they have a fair amount of knowledge and the capability to use it. You would probably fall into a level 2, maybe. Level 3s are the folks who make a living from their bodies, right? And most people don't eat at level 3 permanently. So this is where you dial it in and you really lock it down. But you can only be a level 3 if you've mastered level 1 and level 2. So a lot of what defines elite is the mastery of the fundamentals, which is, not what you expect in a way, right? Because you think that level 3s are doing super complicated, amazing stuff. No, they often just do the fundamentals way better. Like sprinters, they're just running.
But they're just better at doing it.
But they're just better at running.
It's very true. Like one of my goals with this summit is to kind of have the extremes inform the means, right? So taking, as Tim Ferriss said, like, really what is it that the complete opposite ends of the spectrum are doing? Like, what are the people who are not succeeding doing that we can learn from and avoid? And what are the most successful people doing that we can learn from and kind of bring down to reality to employ? And I think that's a huge one, taking those fundamentals and really just hammering them home. So for you, from a nutritional or from an exercise perspective, what are some of those fundamentals that people should be, doesn't matter what their goals are, that are kind of tried, tested, and true for pretty much all humans? What are some of those things that people should be on a daily basis or a regular basis really making a consistent or taking consistent action on?
My answer to that, I think, would be different than most people's, which is that you should get excellent at reading your body. You should know your signals, you should know your cues, you should be able to sense into the subtle nuances of mood, of energy level, fatigue, whatever. You should know your body at an incredibly deep level, because everything flows from that. Then I don't have to ask, should I eat this? Yeah. I know, right? I feel. There's a felt sense. I don't have to use my thinky brain to make decisions, because the decisions are being made here, right, at a very deep level. So that's maybe not an expected answer, but where I see problems with our clients is the dissociation from the body. So they'll say, well, what should I do? And I'll say, check in. Are you hungry? Do you know what that means to be hungry? Do you know what it feels like to be anxious? Are you confusing anxious with hunger? Right? Because the vagal nerve is like innervating all those related systems. So hunger feels like anxiety, or maybe it's sadness. I don't know. So if I'm able to sense into what's happening here and really differentiate all of the cues, that is actually hugely powerful.
That's amazing. And I tell people all the time, like, the best thing you can do for yourself, for your health, is just listen to your body. Yeah. Because everyone's different, as we know.
Right. But people don't know what that means. That's the thing, right? Yeah. What does listen to your body mean? Like, that's kind of hazy for me, right? So really training the actual skills, which we do with our clients, like step by step, this is what it's like to learn to listen to your body.
So give us an example of that. So if somebody, like stress eaters, right? When we're like, I've got 3 little boys at home, it's like a tornado sometimes in the household. So for me and my wife, we just look at each other and we're just like,
yes,
breathe, right? Because it's either that or let's just
breathing into the chip bag, right?
Yeah, like something like that. And I'm sure you guys can relate to that at some level.
Yeah.
So what give us a typical example of like a stress response and how we can identify that and maybe how to overcome that.
Well, I mean, just to go back to what I was saying about the vagal nerve, I mean, so there's this interesting system that runs, basically innervates the face, the head, the neck, and the chest, and the viscera. So, but most of the traffic is this way, it's upstairs. And so what people don't know is that a lot of emotional stuff can kind of manifest here somewhere, right? And physical stuff from eating, like an adrenaline dump, for example, if your blood sugar's low, can also manifest here. So let's say you get hungry, you have a low blood sugar moment, you feel that adrenaline, you get kind of panicky and freaky. Your immediate response might be, oh my God, I'm freaking out, I need to go and eat something right now, right? But if you understand, okay, no, this is a normal response to, feeling hungry, it'll pass, then you're able to decide. But in terms of your specific question, I think people can begin to differentiate their cues, right? So you can learn, okay, let's say I eat when I get anxious. Where does anxiety live for me in my body? Like, what does it actually feel like? Okay, that's interesting. I feel like I understand where that lives. Where does hunger live? Kind of in the same place, but it's different. So over time, I can check in with myself at a very practical level before every meal. Just take like a minute and say, what's happening here? Okay, I'm not feeling hunger here, I'm feeling it here. That's interesting. Maybe that's not hunger, right? So it's really just a quick process of checking it. In the beginning, you won't know. You'll check in and be like, I don't feel anything, right? Especially if you become dissociated, right? A lot of our trauma folks, they don't feel anything. They are in the business of not feeling anything, right? I call it eyebrows up living, like nothing happens from here down. But if you practice that, if you take action and start to build that awareness deliberately of your physical cues, then you start to be able to differentiate. With our coaches, I even suggest that they assign a food and feelings journal. So before people eat or after they eat, have them do like a body scan and see if they notice anything. So it can doesn't have to even be stomach related. It can be headache. It can be, feeling antsy or, clenching your jaw or something like that. But just to start to learn the body cues and write them down.
It's so simple. I mean, in theory, and it's, sure you can do like an IgG sensitivity test and all that stuff, but just listening to your body before, during, and after your meals can make a huge difference.
Yeah.
Actually, very, very recently, my mom, she had to go in for a colonoscopy, so she couldn't eat seeds for 7 days. But she loves tomatoes, but she wasn't allowed to have tomatoes for 7 days. But something very interesting happened is that she felt better than she had in a long time, and she reintroduced tomatoes shortly thereafter, and immediately bloating.
Yeah.
And that was a very powerful process for her to go through, because then she knew immediately this food causes this reaction.
Yes.
And she wasn't aware of that for decades, because she just ate tomatoes like they were going out of style. But just that simple practice of, it wasn't as kind of the same type of awareness that we're talking about, but just identifying that. And maybe for our viewers, that might be something where it's, hey, wow, I feel stress in my stomach or my upper back, or it's satiated when I eat pizza or something else. And just having that awareness can be a game changer.
Absolutely. And I think you're getting at something else, which is the idea of self-experimentation, right? Have a hypothesis, test it. Your body is an amazing kind of experimental playground, right? And so I think self-experimentation, and we talk about this at Precision Nutrition a lot, but self-experimentation is also really useful, because then you're not speculating. You're not going on the internet and saying, oh, I wonder if I should try that, banana diet or something, right? You have the evidence of your own body. And even if you're a genetic outlier who thrives on tomatoes, or for whom tomatoes are poisonous, whatever, and you have that lived experience evidence, which we tend not to trust so much. So part of coaching is helping people learn to trust the lived experience of their bodies. Whether that's, I also say honor your hunger, right? Hunger is an important signal, but we've got to respect it, right? We've got to respect it, know it, learn it. Emotions are your signals. Physical symptoms are your signals. So whatever your body's giving you, that is evidence. And you can use evidence experimentally to draw your own conclusions.
Yeah, I think that's awesome. I mean, it's like, you can read thousands of research papers if you want, but ultimately, whatever works for you is what works best. Yeah. Which makes complete sense. With that said, when people are, let me ask you this first. I'm going to kind of catch you off guard a little bit with this question. So, when it comes to losing weight or creating change, what's something that a lot of people are unaware of, like something they don't even know that they don't even know?
Oh, the importance of the environment. Huge, because we all have this delusion. And
you're not talking about like air pollution and water pollution.
No, just our surroundings, right? How much that affects us, because we are all convinced that we are masters of our domain, right? That we are fully in control of every decision we make, and nothing could be further from the truth. I mean, really, I would say we're driving the bus about 5 to 10% of the time. Sure. The rest of the time, our decisions are driven by our environment. Who's around us? What's around us, smells, sights, sounds, cues we don't even know about.
And this is where that self-awareness comes in too, because as you start to tap into this, you start to realize like, oh, okay, I understand that the chocolate's in the cupboard, and that's why I'm starting to think about that. That's I often say like environment will always trump willpower.
Oh yes.
Like you could 100%. Have the best of intentions, but if you buy stuff and it's in your pantry that's not supposed to be in there, I have a law that says it will get eaten eventually. Yeah. So how do you make, what are some simple things to improve your environment, to improve your chances of success?
Well, one way to go on this is to make bad behavior more difficult, right? That's where people's mind always goes, right? How can I stop myself from doing the stuff I don't want to do.
Yeah.
And that's one angle. But the corollary of that is to say, how can I make the desired behavior easier, right? And I talk about easiness, and people are always like, easy? No, it's supposed to be really hard and painful and suffering, right? And I'm like, no, what is the easiest, laziest, low-hanging fruitiest thing that you can do to do the desired behaviors? How can you make it as easy as possible to do what you want, right? So a simple environmental change, having healthy food near you and convenient. Like as convenient as possible, right? Have a bag of pre-washed baby vegetables like within arm's reach, right there, done.
That's funny because we just, so for my son's birthday, we recently had a bunch of stuff out on the counter, and it was just like chopped up veggies, some fruit, and we're like, this should be every single day, because if it were pretzels and chips, it would be the same thing. You just walk by, grab a chip, grab a pretzel, but instead it's carrots and celery and other stuff. Just that convenience is so easy and powerful.
Yeah, and the idea of making things easy, sometimes our clients get a little suspicious at this because they're like, if it's easy and simple and I'm doing less work, like, is that right? Like, shouldn't I feel deprived, and shouldn't I have to use willpower, and shouldn't I have to overcome some kind of hurdle? and I think this is also one reason why many of these projects fail, because people seek difficulty. Because we assume if it's difficult, that must be good. I'm like, no, man, be lazy. Be lazy, make it easy. Assume, I call it assume the suck. Assume that you will be rushed, busy, distracted, something else going on, the kid's crying, the dog just barfed on the rug. Like, assume that your life is an absolute madhouse, and then make your decisions, because that will prevent you from thinking, oh yeah, I can handle this, no worries, right? I'll make a gourmet dinner tonight. No, you won't. So assume that things will be crazy, that your meeting will go late, whatever, and plan accordingly from that starting point.
One of my friends, Todd Herman, who's an amazing business and performance coach with a lot of athletes, he calls it negative visualization. It's like, sure, everything's gonna be great when things are going well, but what happens when? Poo hits the fan, for lack of a better term. Because when you can identify and see yourself ahead of time, proactively figuring out the solutions to those worst case scenarios, then if they happen, you've already got it mapped out.
Yes. And I think this also allows us to have compassion for ourselves, because what tends to happen is we imagine the best case scenario, which almost never happens, and then we think, what's wrong with me? Why do I suck so much, right? Why can't I make this happen? Well, it's because your experimental model was incorrect. But also, if you assume that you're not good at things, it's a more compassionate perspective. It's like, okay, you're going to be struggling with some stuff, so how can I make this easier for you, right? And that's a dialogue I'm having with myself, in case you're wondering who I'm talking to, right? It is like a dialogue with ourselves, where we kind of become our own best friends, right? And the metaphor I use is putting on your seatbelt. Like, no one expects that they can bench press a dashboard at 100 kilometers an hour, right? So we just put on our seatbelt, and we don't feel bad about not having the bench press strength. We just allow ourselves to be that way. And so if we can allow ourselves to be imperfect, right, to have an imperfect life, start from that place of compassion, the solutions we generate from that perspective are far superior.
That's great advice. That's awesome. So what about mistakes when it comes to fat loss? What's one big mistake you see people make?
Well, I think what I just said probably would be the biggest one, is that incorrect assumptions about what you can do. The other one I would say is attaching to the outcome. Everyone comes to fat loss with an outcome in mind. I want to lose 10 pounds. I want to be a size 2. I wanted this, right? It's very usually numeric and very outcome based. But they have very minimal sense of what the process is, right? Process is everything.
That's huge.
I recently had a conversation with a fighter who wants to weight cut, and that was the world that I lived in for a while: weight cutting, fighting, and it's a bit of a difficult game to play, because you cannot control your weight. You can control all the behaviors that lead to your weight, right? And fighters are very aggressive about how they get their weight down. You can try every trick in the book. You can lie in the sauna for 3 hours, or run around the parking lot in a garbage bag. But ultimately, you cannot control the outcome. And so the biggest mistake is attaching too much to the outcome, right? Because you cannot control that, whereas you can control the process.
Yeah, that's something that I really recognize myself. So when I was playing soccer professionally, I would always visualize the process. I would go to bed the night before, visualize the entire game the next day, and fast forward, and I'd see myself in different positions and kind of seeing what would happen. When I stopped playing soccer and switched over to kind of what I'm doing now, a lot of it became outcome based. Say, okay, I know what I want to achieve, and then I kind of forgot about the process, because as an athlete, it's very easy to mimic body motions and different scenarios, but in everyday life, it's maybe not as evident to focus on the process. But I think what you just said is huge, because there's been research that has shown, one particular one comes to mind, where they had two groups of students, one where they had them basically visualize the outcome of the test, where they said, okay, well, you know you're going to get, let's say 100%. And then they had the other group visualize the process of what it would take to get the 100% or whatever it was. And the group that visualized the process, when the test actually came to be taken, did much better, because they had gone through, okay, here's realistically what is going to go into making that happen. Whereas the visualize the outcome only group was just like, it's all good. It's going to take care of itself.
Big question mark.
Law of attraction. I'm just going to sit back and chill.
That's right. That's right.
So that's a process. Like, so it could be something as simple as like going to bed, or kind of planning out your next day, or whatever it might be. Like, what are some examples of?
Well, those are great examples, because they should be small, right? They should be extremely small. And I think if you're, and this brings us back to our conversation about, elite athletes and mastering fundamentals. I'll map this onto something I used to do, which is to train judo, right? And in judo, very small things are important, right? How you hold your hand, whether it's this way or that way, or, and judo's a lot about sensing very subtle weight shifts. So the guys and girls who are super awesome at judo, they don't have fancy, complicated stuff. They can sense weight shifts. They know exactly where to put their hand. And so when it comes to losing fat, there are elements of the process that are fundamental but not sexy, so people don't learn them, but they can be very, very small. A great one you just suggested is having a pre-bed ritual, right? So not just getting sleep, because getting sleep is an outcome, but knowing the steps that you need to take to get yourself there. You might need to start that process an hour before you go to bed, right? And you need to have that locked down. Even something simple like knowing how to order in a restaurant, right? And then doing it. How to pack your workout clothes, right? How to find a good route to the gym. All these little things. And with our clients, we say, master them one by one, right? Don't try to take on the whole world. Master that one link in the chain. We had clients who were so intimidated about going to the gym that it took them a few weeks just to get up the courage to actually call the gym. So they called the gym, but then I remember one lady in particular, this hurt my heart to know. It was so poignant. She would drive to the gym, that was a big victory. She would drive to the gym and sit in the parking lot, but she couldn't go in yet. But every day she would drive. And sometimes she'd cry a little bit, which was very sweet. And then one day she got out of her car and she walked in, but she couldn't get to that point without taking that step in between. So we tend to devalue the in-between steps. But typically, if people are getting stuck on things, it's because they've missed a step, and I like to say things before things, right? What has to happen? If you want your sleep, okay, reverse engineer it. What has to happen in order for you to get to bed?
That's awesome. There's been so much amazing wisdom in this interview. I hope you guys press rewind 1,000 times and pick up on it, because this is stuff, I'm fascinated by this discussion, because I think that this applies to everything. And this is something I strive to improve in my own life every single day. And one of my biggest objectives for, I would say, more than 5 to 7 years was getting up early in the morning. And because I know for myself, when I get up before the sun and I have 2 hours to myself, I'm just able to get so much done, and that's awesome. And for years, it took forever to kind of get that mastered. And within the past year or so, I've really just hammered that out. So every day it's 5 a.m., no problem. But what's really helped with that is setting up the environment ahead of time. For me, where I have my laptop, I have my headphones, I have my bright light first thing in the morning, like my chair is pulled out from the table, so I don't even have to pull that out. It's all done. And But that's taken forever to make that happen. But the other important piece was having a really important reason why. And having 3 kids under the age of 4 is a good reason why.
That's
because when the kids are up, there's nothing getting done.
Yeah.
So I don't know if you've got kids that are that age, you'll probably realize as well. So a lot of this stuff you're talking about, I can definitely resonate with, and I'm sure our viewers can as well. So I want to thank you for sharing a lot of this amazing wisdom, which has been tremendous. Before we finish, I've got one more question for you. And I just got word that the human species is about to become extinct because of this obesity crisis that we're facing. And so you've been called into this special task force, and they're asking, okay, Krista, what's one thing that we can do right now to reverse this epidemic? What would you say?
I'm going to give you an unexpected answer, which would be I would improve humans' relationship having skills, because the fundamental reasons why people become obese have very little to do with people being lazy, people eating too much. We live in an environment where addictions are prevalent. We're all looking to self-medicate. We're all looking to get through the day. And the biggest drivers of dysfunction in our eating habits or our health habits or our self-care habits, the biggest drivers are a lack of good interpersonal relationships. If I am alienated from you, and I'm alienated from the world, and I'm alienated from myself, I mean, I cannot be healthy, right? And in our clients, what we see is fundamentally a self-care deficit, a compassion deficit, a self-awareness deficit, an intrapersonal deficit, which is kind of the lack of having a good relationship with yourself, and an interpersonal deficit, which is not having a good relationship with others. And if you kind of think about what is it like in 2015 to be in the world, it's like a world of fragmented relationships, a world of traumatic experiences, a world of distractions and stimulations, and only a very limited capacity to manage them. So it's completely inevitable that we would go down this road, because if it's not obesity, it's something else. It's another form of self-medication. And you know, so when I see someone who's grappling with obesity, that is a person who's in pain, right? It's a person who's in physical pain a lot of the time, because I certainly was when I was overweight. But it's more than that. It's a person who is in interpersonal and intrapersonal pain. So it's probably a different answer than most people would give you.
But that's great. I mean, that's a very, very legit answer. Yeah. And it's something that's not remedied by having 1,000 friends on Facebook.
No, nor by another diet. Because if you are hating on yourself, you know, I've been fat and I've been super lean, right? And my life was still the same. Yeah. Right? Being super lean solved nothing in my life. Arguably, it created far more problems than it solved. But my idea was that, oh, if I could just get down to 15% body fat, then everything's going to be awesome. It is not awesome. It's arguably worse. But, you know, to me, obesity is just a symptom, right? It's just a symptom. And one of the most common things I hear from the coaches that we train is, my clients don't know how to care for themselves. Right? To me, that is so poignant. Everyone is in the world trying to do the right thing for themselves, for others, and yet not quite getting it. Like, that is the fundamental dilemma.
Wow, that's pretty profound. And it's interesting because you see all these graphs about like sugar consumption and kind of its correlation to obesity and the whole kind of low-fat craze and the same correlation. But I don't know if there's really any graphs that show, maybe there are, I just haven't seen them, that show the rise in technological kind of exponential increase and this correlation to obesity and maybe unhappiness to some degree, because it's like a paradox. It's like we're more connected than ever before, but we're more disconnected than ever before.
Yes.
So do you find that the technology, ironic that you're watching this or listening to this, is part of the cause of a lot of this disconnection now?
It can be. I mean, I think, again, it's also a symptom. It's a cause and a solution, right? If I'm someone who can't get support from the people around me, then maybe I can reach out, right? I mean, that's why online coaching is really successful. A lot of our clients don't have anyone, you know, their families are not supportive. In fact, their families are actively sabotaging their efforts, right? So they come to us, and often we are the first points of contact. We're the first supportive people in their environment, and we might be 3,000 miles away, right? So I think it's a double-edged sword, and it has opportunities and drawbacks, and that's technology. It always has, right? It's a tool, just like a hammer. I can hammer a nail and build something, or I can hit you in the head with it, right? But I think you're definitely onto something about the potential lack of social connection there, because what we have done is created substitute connections, right? And sometimes those are great. Like if my cell phone's my buddy right now, and that's the only buddy I have, awesome, I have a buddy, right? But yet we still need to build those skills of truly relating as human beings.
When I was in school, I took a class in economics, which was a huge waste of time. Not really, but kind of, considering I was studying kinesiology. But one of the things I remember learning was that one of the economists of the time was talking about, in a period of high tech, there's always a demand, or a higher demand, for high touch, which I think you just mentioned, like this importance for just the basic human need of real interaction.
Yes.
And I think like online stuff like Facebook or other online platforms can be amazing, but as you mentioned, they can also be deceiving, because you're like, well, this person unfriended me. I've never met them, but all of a sudden my day has gone to hell, right?
Yes.
So I just hope it brings some perspective to our viewers. But that's some great advice about like really just understanding the need for connection and deeper human relationships.
Well, to pick up on your point about high touch, one of the things we do in our coach training program is train people on the skills that they will need to create that high touch, right? Like, what does that look like?
Yeah.
How does that manifest as a skill? And often what our coaches find is that when they build those skills of listening and empathizing and kind of connecting at that mammalian brain level, they get much better client outcomes, right? So it's not just about being touchy-feely or being woo-woo. You get better outcomes when you are able to connect better as a human being. And often, as coaches, we would call our clients and they would have questions ostensibly about some kind of dietary problem, like should I eat beans or whatever. But really what they wanted, what you'd realize at the end of the conversation, what they really wanted was that connection. They just wanted to be heard, right? They just wanted to be seen and understood and connected with. Yeah. So, any coaches listening, build your human skills, The science is important. The dietary science is important. You don't want to be wrong, right? But build your human skills.
Well, Krista, it's been a pleasure having you on the Fat Loss Summit.
Thank you.
This has been great. Hope you guys enjoyed it.